Hi everyone, my name is Jordan Brooks with iRise Wellness, and today we are talking about what it means to be a leader. And to help me with that conversation, I have an amazing young person with me that I get to work with, and I would like to let you just go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Mary Milosky. I'm a third-year student majoring in psychology and minoring in African American Studies on the pre-law track.
Awesome. So African American Studies,
Mm-hmm.
psychology, pre-law, right?
Correct.
And we're here to talk about what it means to be a leader.
Mm-hmm.
So let's, maybe just for me to help us kind of guide the conversation, what type of spaces have you been a leader in already so far?
Okay, so as of right now in college, I'm in a sorority, and within my sorority, I'm the director of social awareness,
Okay.
which is just another form of DEI work within my chapter. I am also, or I was, in NAACP, where I was the student government liaison.
Nice.
I'm currently in BSA, which is Black Student Alliance, and I also serve as a student government liaison for that. I serve in student government as the director of DEI, and then I also serve as a mentor within the pre-law club, and I'm also a mentor with YSS.
Awesome.
And I'm pretty sure that covers it.
That covers it?
Yes.
Sure, right? That's
Yeah.
extensive though. That's a lot of different ways, both in your academic spaces,
Mm-hmm.
and like some more of the, like, I guess you would say, social or co-curricular kind of
Yes,
spaces
for
as far as
sure.
where your leadership goes. Okay, cool. Well, so we'll definitely come back to that. I wanted just to make sure I got an understanding of all the different things
Okay.
that you kind of engage with first. But if maybe we can start out with like simply what the podcast episode is about.
Mhm.
Like, what does it mean to be a leader from your own perspective? What are your thoughts?
I think, to sum it up, the best way is just holding yourself to a higher standard and expecting more from yourself, greater from yourself, and then pushing yourself for better. It's like, at least for me, how I look at leadership. It's not so much the position, but like, what expectations, in a sense, do you have regarding your own interpersonal goals and such?
How did you kind of come to that?
I feel like just through life and like watching people and people who I aspire to be isn't always sometimes the people who make the most money or have the most power, but the people I think who are the most impactful to me in my life. And those people, maybe society or culture wouldn't label them as leaders, but I, and the impact they left me, I would label them as a leader in a sense, because they showed me the way in which I wanted to do things or live my life out. So
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
cool. Would you mind sharing about like who are some of those people then maybe?
for example, I would say like my stepmom and like her mom, who I refer to as like my grandmother. They're two of the most kindest, like genuine, but also real people I know.
Yeah.
But they showed me that through not like any specific leadership position, but just how they interact with people on the daily basis. Like my stepmom, I've never seen her talk badly about anyone. She always will look at the positive, but that being said, she doesn't negate the negative. She just chooses to use that perspective, which I think is honestly a very good way to look at life and dealing with things, because talking negatively about someone, like, while you might want to or might feel good, like, what does it do for you in that situation? So
Right. Yeah.
yeah.
No, that's real. And I think even for me, my first kind of example of a leader, I can look back at my family too, right? Like my granddad, my grandma, and my mother and father, right? They're all great examples. In a similar way, my granddad, no matter where he would go, people would just like act as though they've known each other for years,
Yep.
right? He just had that type of personality
Exactly.
where when he spoke with you and he connected with you, he made you feel comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And he made you feel like you were valued, I think, right? And I
Yeah.
think people gravitated to that energy in him.
Exactly.
And then similarly, my mom and my dad and grandma, right? They're just loving and giving people, right? And just always kind of like trying to look out for folks. And so I think those lessons definitely kind of passed down
Exactly.
to me from watching and seeing them. Yeah.
That's so true. And that is a really good quality of a leader, I think, is like the ability sometimes, I don't think you can even put a specific definition on it, but being able to make people feel like seen, worthy, and comfortable is a quality that not a lot of people, I would say, have, but like that quality, I feel like is so impactful
Yeah.
in people and society.
No, that's real, right? Like you said, there's this idea to be seen and to be felt, to be understood. I think so. With our group, with iRise, right, we often talk a lot around like education and what does it mean to create educational spaces where folks feel felt, understood, heard, or to feel seen, right? And so, I guess I'm curious for you now. Like, can you think of or remember outside of maybe some of your family examples, but like other leaders or folks who did that, who like they help you feel seen, and kind of what happened with that?
In terms of feeling seen and heard, I think this is honestly pretty recent, which is kind of ironic, but I recently got a new job and I'm a DEI intern at the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences. And my boss, we were talking about law school, and I was telling her how I want to go to maybe like a more prestigious law school and things of that fashion. But I told her, I was like, I'm worried because this sounds bad to say, but in reality, it's like Black excellence is real. So it's like when I'm going to apply to these schools, like there's so many amazing Black college students who are doing so much good stuff, and I'm like, I feel like what I'm doing isn't enough. And like she was one of the people that was like, Mary, you know what, like you might not think that, but like you are special, like the energy you give and like how you like show yourselves to others like is more than like the average person. And I feel like sometimes I like need to hear that, because she didn't really like say anything specific, but like her as someone who's like very successful and like has gone through that process, like just her saying that to me like made me feel like very validated in a sense. So I feel like as the most recent, that's when I felt like seen and heard, when I didn't think I needed it, but I did need it.
Wow.
So
no, that's cool. I'm glad that happened, right? Because like you've got some dope things about you and everything, but I think something that came up for me as you're sharing that is that weight maybe of Black excellence when it comes to us thinking about leadership and how those connect, and the ways that can either help you feel like you have something to propel towards for,
or the pressure,
or it can feel like pressure.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. The difference between what's propelling and what's pressure. I don't know, any other experiences, or how has that pressure maybe manifested? Might be.
I feel like, so my mom's an immigrant, so for some like background on that. So growing up, she's like from Africa, and not to say a stereotype, a lot of African parents take education very seriously because a lot of them immigrate here for their children and their grandchildren to have a better life. So from a young age, my mom really pushed education, self-education, like being the best. And I think I was 8 or 9 when she told me, and be gay is my first name, but I go by Mary for a variety of reasons. But she was like, be gay, like being a woman and being a woman of color, you always have to work twice as hard to be at the same level as your counterpart. And I think, while I think that's true, I think I also internalize it a little. So I always have the sense of like not feeling good enough. And I always feel like as someone who is very educated and like knows the system and how it sometimes isn't for our best interest, I put that pressure on myself to prove myself or to prove to people why I should be where I am and why I should be in the spaces I hold and stuff. So it like makes me work harder, but at the same time I'm always like, am I good enough? Am I doing enough work? Should I be doing more? Are people going to take me seriously? Things of that fashion. So.
No, that's powerful, right? Because as we think about, again, like this question of like, what does it mean to be a leader? There's not only just the idea that I have to have a skill set within a particular place, or like I have to have this like desire to kind of step forward in these other spaces, but I also have to overcome the doubt, the pressure.
Exactly.
I have to recognize the social circumstance that I'm in as, like you said, as a woman, a Black woman or a woman of color, right? And like having to make sense of that for yourself as you kind of develop and grow into that leadership. It's not the same journey as other people's leadership.
And the intersectionality is real too. If you include like socioeconomic status, like sexuality, all of these like factors, like they all play that role in how you view yourself, but also how society and people view you too.
Oh, that's powerful. So as we think about that, this piece of with leadership of in the context of what does it mean to see Black excellence and see our own space within Black excellence in the context of leadership, and to turn that pressure more into something that propels us.
Exactly.
Is there anything that you have done or other people, like that conversation you had with your supervisor, have happened that have helped you go like, I'm going to go do this thing within my sorority. I'm going to go do this thing for my major. I'm going to go do this thing for SGA and whatnot in these spaces. What types of, I guess, either words of wisdom or spaces, I guess, maybe have you been in that help cultivate that?
I feel like, well, my father like didn't come from like the most like wealthiest background. He's worked very hard to like be the successful man that he is today. So he's always pushed on me 2 things. You are what you say, like your word, and like work ethic. So it's like once you start something, you don't finish, or like you don't quit. So I always like, I think 2 of those are the biggest traits about myself that like I include to all of my life. So it's like, if you say you're gonna do something, you're gonna do it. You always keep your promises, you always keep your word. And then if you start something, even if it's hard, you like need to continue and persevere. And I feel like that quality has like allowed me to, regardless of whatever situation I'm in, I just have to be like, you gotta buck up and you gotta at least try your hardest. And even if you don't succeed, I can at least tell myself looking back that I did try and I put in the effort, because you honestly don't know until you try.
Right.
So
no, that's real. My dad always did that with me too. He was like, look, if you're going to start something, at least finish it. Even if you don't come back to it.
Exactly.
Finish it out.
Once you sign up for a sport, you gotta finish the season. You cannot quit.
You sign up for that sport like, oh, this season is long. Are we still winning? I don't want to go home. No, just but that's funny. Yeah, I definitely got those types of lessons. And like, I think for me, some of the space that's been pushing is, I was kind of quiet, I think, a little bit more when I was younger. And I remember having a moment with a counselor in this program, Upward Bound. I was in Upward Bound, and we're doing all this stuff like through the summer program, and we had this kind of like, I guess there was kind of like this like tensious moment in a scenario where it was like, are you going to defend the people who you're there to protect, or are you going to kind of like just kind of go in the background, right? And like, I kind of stood up for folks, and he was like, I've never seen you act like that before a day in my life. He's like, so that means something's inside of you. You should bring that out more.
I feel that.
And I was like, okay, what does that mean? And so I guess where I'm going with that is like, sometimes it's those encouraging words from those outside folks who, like you said, who see you.
Exactly.
Who remind you of like, pull that thing out, right? Like, you've got something in you that needs to be shared with the world.
Exactly.
And
even sometimes like the negative too, because like I do a lot of DEI work, and what really pushed me to like start being passionate about DEI and like really wanting to know that's like what I want to do as a career is that I've gone to PWIs my whole life, and there's like so many instances where like things happen and I just like let it slide and let it slide. And because like my parents always like, be the bigger person, like don't try to argue with people, especially those who aren't gonna listen to you or whatever. And so like just growing up, I think I've always felt very, like what you said, like not seen, like not heard. And so after a certain point, especially with the George Floyd stuff, I was like, I'm done. Like, I'm gonna speak my truth. I'm gonna advocate for what I believe in. I've like learned to like bring it back and not always argue with people or like give them my energy if I don't think they deserve it. But like that has like that negative has like led me to like what I think is like my purpose in life. So
yeah, no, that's real, right? Like, cause that, I think at the end of the day, a lot of times your leadership is coming from wanting to address a scenario or wanting to provide either a service, or again, it's like that protecting or taking care of type of thing. Like, if we're leading and it's not for other people's benefit, at least my opinion on it, right? If you're leading and it's not for other people's benefit, you should be kind of wary.
Exactly.
Right? Because you could be leading folks into destruction in a way, right? Or into harm, but you might maybe still benefit. But is that even really stable, right?
Exactly.
Like,
even that in itself, I don't think is a true leader.
Talk about it.
Because I think the biggest component of leadership is empathy.
Okay.
Which because I think in order to lead people, you have to understand people, and to understand people, you need to understand perspective. And I think understanding perspective is essentially what empathy looks like, and sympathy. So I think that's how, at least when I take my leadership positions, it's not like what do I think, but what do I think and how will people perceive that and feel about it, and how will that impact them in like whatever scenario, situation, or committee I'm in. So it's like whenever I think leadership, I don't think it's me. I always think I'm the facilitator, but for all those other people.
Right. See, these are the things we need. I rock with that, right? Like, leading is an accountability back to the people that you're with. Like, it's not just it's not just you. No, that's powerful. There was something else that you mentioned though just a second ago, and I was like, ooh, we definitely need to come back to that. You were talking about, like being like, okay, nope, I'm not gonna let this stuff slide anymore.
Oh yeah.
I'm gonna kind of
like my purpose in life.
Purpose and stuff, right? So yeah, can you share a little bit about that purpose that you've been finding?
I feel like my entire life, people have been like, Mary, you'd be such a good lawyer, but not for the right reasons. I've always been a very argumentative, like combative, like anyone tells me something, I'm like, but why? Like, I always question things, like, within rules, like, why I like laws, like, I like to look for loopholes, essentially, and, like, stuff. So I want to, like, use law to advocate, educate, and also like do things to like change our system,
right,
in a sense. And I think that's just my purpose, because like I want to give people things that like maybe I didn't have, or like I thought was lacking, and things of that fashion.
Yeah.
So I just want to like leave a legacy that is like positive and creates change, like the betterment of our society, and specifically for our people. Because I think that's a big thing that like, my mom instilled in me. Even though she was never from America, she wasn't born here, came to America when she was 19, 20. She was always like, she rode Black people so hard regardless of like where you came from, because like we collectively can relate to each other so much just through our experience. And I think that is insane, but also a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Because you can go to random places, and sometimes I have like make like the best friends, the best conversation, just because we are both Black and we get each other on a level that like no one else will get unless you are Black.
Unless you're Black
and
too.
I think that's just like so crazy and amazing.
Right.
So I want to like use that in a sense and like do something positive with that.
Yeah, and see it used for our benefit in the end, right? I mean,
exactly.
We're recording this right now. We're right in the time of voting. Right?
It's literally election day today.
It's election day today as we're recording this, right? And thinking about that responsibility. I think for me, right, my first time being able to legally vote was the Obama election, the first one. Yeah.
Wow.
And being able to do that then, and it was like, so there's all this energy around. What does that mean, right? Like for us to engage and use our leadership through democracy and things and stuff in that way. So yeah, that's even an interesting kind of backdrop to our conversation today, right? But so what I'm kind of curious about now, if you could with me, is let's talk about what does it mean to be a leader as a student leader, and in the many facets that you have been a student leader, right? And like you said, you've gone to majority PWIs, and you're like, I want to do things that are meaningful, meaningful to me, meaningful to the people who I feel connected to, and things, right? So yeah, let's talk about the ups, downs, twists, turns, and stuff of what the student leadership experience has been like for you.
I feel like regardless of like identity, you need a certain level of, what's the word, like, how do I want to say it? Like being unapologetic.
Okay.
So if you have a truth and you have a certain belief or feeling, like you have to ride that out as a leader, because people look up to you. So when I think of the biggest things is like what I said, like keeping your promises, like whatever you say, you have to match that with your actions. Yeah. Because I think because like being a leader is people look up to you. Perspective is important, perception is important. So you need to like walk the talk, you know? So I think it's like the biggest thing, and especially like as a Black woman within like PWIs, like this sounds bad to say, but like people will try to look for reasons to discount you or not take you seriously, or whatever, for regardless if people want to acknowledge that or not. I've seen and experienced that in my own personal life. So it's like, I think it's better to acknowledge that so you can have that and be ready for that, instead of being like, you know what, Obama was elected president, like no one's whatever, like it's fine. Like that's always in the back of my head, because then I know I will always hold myself to that higher standard just to make sure that box is ticked.
Right.
And then within that, regardless of identity, when it's just being a leader in general, I think the biggest thing, and which is something I'm always continuously working on, is just listening. Okay. I tend to always talk and take hold of the conversation and be the one giving ideas, but as a leader, like I said before, you're not doing it for yourself, you're doing it for other people. So you should be the one taking a step back, listening to what people say, and then what that topic, initiative, or whatever looks like, you essentially compile it and do what's best for that team or that role to get the outcome that is so desired. Right. So I think that's what leadership looks like, at least as a student. And then in terms of dealing with faculty, I think the biggest thing is that I think people think just because you're young that, oh, you haven't finished college or whatever, that you might think people might not take you seriously, but as long as you articulate yourself well and you are giving a message that can be received well, I think you can do so much within faculty, staff, administration. You just have to keep it real and keep it honest, but make sure that level of respect is always there. Because if you're dealing with people who are older than you and have done more, whatever, you need to be able to match that, but also know when you should be listening and learning from others, because as a leader you should also be learning from other leaders to become a better leader. Yeah,
definitely.
Right, like Jordan, like whenever I talk to you, I feel like I learn so much about like even the things you don't say, but how you say it. I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to be a leader who talks like this, and like uses metaphors. I was talking to my dad about like how I use these great metaphors to explain things. I'm like, that's just so amazing. Because I think it's such like a way to reach more people. Sometimes I feel like sometimes I talk in a way that might be harder for people to like grasp sometimes. So I was just saying that, but
I appreciate that. Wow, heart moment. We're not about to do that on this. No, but no, I do appreciate that, right? And I think no, that's just a heart.
It's true though. I'm not just saying that to say that. I wasn't actually talking to my dad about that.
No, for real. No, I appreciate that and I accept that wholeheartedly, right? And I think what that kind of comes up for me is just something you've been mentioning this whole time is basically like, how do you allow yourself to relate to people, right? How do you allow yourself to relate to people and to be able to connect with them? And I think as students, you're in an amazing time to create relationship.
Exactly.
Right? Like this is one of those moments, few moments that you get in a life to be like, I'm going to connect with other people who could be my colleagues later on, or like you said, with faculty, staff, and administration who like may have been in spaces that I'm trying to go to already, right? And like I can kind of like build on that relationship. And I
have one really good point related
Ooh,
that you just made me think of.
Go.
Especially related to student leaders, like I think what's so cool about being a student leader in college is that you are a leader to your peers and you learn so much, because usually within leadership there's a hierarchy, and within that hierarchy there's most of the time age, and you see that within jobs because usually the people who have higher jobs are people who are usually more experienced, older, whatever, but we're all within 4 years of each other, so it teaches you how to, you can't talk down to someone who is your age. I feel like sometimes leaders will use certain tools or whatever to create this hierarchy, but I think real leadership is when there is no hierarchy.
Okay.
And that is, I think, achieved within like a college like leadership setting, and it teaches you to like do it, which I think is the way leadership should be done, where you treat them as your peers, you treat them as your equal, you take their response how you would take anyone else's response, even if that includes another type of leader. So that's one thing I've learned for sure, because like growing up I was kind of like a control freak, so whenever I took leadership roles it was more like, you do this, you do this, you do this. I would just tell people what to do, instead of being like, what do you want to do, what do you think is best? Like, managing, how can I help? Leading. Exactly, yeah. So
right, some of us, our examples of leadership are managing people. It's like, you go, like you said, you go do this, as opposed to like, how can I help with that spark or that inspiration that you have in yourself to kind of keep you pushing on. That's real. That's real. How do you choose then? Like, I imagine as a student, right, like today there's so many options out here.
Like just to be a leader, or what specifically?
What things to get into, right? Like again, there's your major, there's your social life, there's student government, there's cultural organizations and things, right? So I'm like curious, how do you even choose and find the space where you do that?
To be completely transparent, I'm not gonna lie. Like a lot of stuff I do is for my resume.
There you go.
Like that is like,
this is the time.
I still enjoy it and I'm still passionate about it, but I'm a very like thought person. I like think through my future, like this is what I'm gonna do to do this to get this, you know? So in order to get into law school, like you need leadership roles, you need volunteer roles, you need mentorship, like, and that's how I specifically choose what I'm interested in, but it serves a purpose as well, because I'm very intentional with my time, because time is money, and that's how I look at life in a sense. So I just do what I think I need to fill for a specific thing, but then I do what I'm passionate about. So if you look at all my stuff, it's related to either like Black people, people of color, DEI work, or kids, just because I have like a little soft spot for like mentorship. Because like growing up, I wish I had a mentor in specific times in my life, so I feel like going through those experiences, I want to help someone as well, which is why I do YSS, which is Youth Shelter and Services. So
no, see, that's powerful, and I think there's nothing wrong with that decision. Like I think sometimes there's this weird narrative that's out there, right? That like, even though I'm trying to do something for the people, that you're not supposed to gain anything as well. It can be reciprocal, right? Those relationships should be reciprocal. I get something as I'm giving. And that's that feeding and fueling of each other. It goes back to the empathy. Right? Like empathy is about that interconnection between people, right?
But the minute you take but that's one thing I will say, is the minute you take a leadership role and it's not for the right reasons, I feel like you're not setting yourself up for success. I can't say 100% everything I do and I am a part of, I'm 100% passionate about it, and I do care about, or I would not do it, because if I were to do it, I would not do it as well as I should, or should be doing it, so.
Yeah, that was definitely a hard lesson for me in college. It's like, what all do you get involved with, and you try it, because like I'm from the space where I think like I can do anything and everything all the time, right? Like especially once that person was like, open yourself up, go do it all.
Yep.
Right? And it was hard for me to figure out like how do I limit that and be able to do a few things well.
Exactly.
And do a few things in a meaningful way, and as I expand, kind of grow into it. So that was one of those slow lessons. One of those slow lessons for me. But I think I finally kind of figured it out and got it done.
I think you have too. So yeah for sure.
No, I appreciate that. And I'm like really enjoying hearing a little bit more now too, even about you and how you kind of come into what you're thinking about as far as like your leadership and your engagement and things that you have kind of goal wise and whatnot. Like it's always nice to get more story.
Really?
On the folks that we work with.
Yeah,
right?
That's true.
Because like you just said, y'all here for 4 years.
Exactly.
Right? And so sometimes that 4 years can be like a flash.
It's starting to feel like that, honestly.
Right? And that student can come in and out and you're like, man, I had all these great moments and things and stuff, but the depth of being able to like sit down with somebody and talk a little bit further.
I always think context is great too. I think as a leader, context is extremely important.
Yeah.
Because within my current roles within student government, like a lot of mistakes I made and realized why I made those mistakes is because I assumed and I didn't take in context.
Gotcha.
So.
Word.
Yeah.
No, context is big. Especially artists. Everything within me says you got to get the context to understand
exactly
what's kind of going down. No, that's real. So maybe, this will be a good one then. We're talking about context. This is a whole new age, new era right now. That's like college leaders, I guess you would say, right? Like,
exactly.
Like you said, we've had the racial unrest that we've had for this past few years. We are coming out of pandemic, COVID types of models and behaviors of how we had to navigate and be with people. So now we're in this space, right, where like folks are relearning what it means to be in community with each other actually. And since leadership is such a big part, or a big part of leadership is relationship and community, what has it been like to be in leadership positions now and trying to do that work of re-engaging people and showing them what it means to be in community?
Re-engagement's like, even within my own community, sometimes it's hard to like get people engaged, even those who sign up to do things. So I feel like I learned, as I'm a psychology major, I love to use psychology to help like explain and talk about stuff like intrinsic motivation will always work better than extrinsic. So as a leader, what I'm thinking is, what motivates you and how can I use what I know what motivates you to motivate you to finish the task or goal at hand. So I feel like in terms of re-engaging people, I just like try to figure out and understand people and figure out their wants and needs, aspirations and goals, and then use that for what either I want to accomplish and combine that, or if they are like working under me or within my committee and things of that fashion, I use that to then guide their work or our work as a group. Because at the end of the day, like, I want people to enjoy what they're doing and be passionate about it, because that will keep them doing it and also create better and higher quality work.
Yeah, no, that's real, right? Like we gotta have that motivation, that passion, because if it's dead otherwise.
Exactly.
Right, like we can do things and you can accomplish something, but if it doesn't have that life force and that energy in it.
And then another thing too that I just thought of for like leadership and qualities is that I think leaders who seem personable and real and who make mistakes and acknowledge it and maybe even like in a funny way are a lot better received than leaders who seem perfect, untouchable, icy, and things of that fashion.
Right.
Because it makes you seem like a real human being. And people will forgive you and give you grace as a leader when you make mistakes if you show them that you're human through that relationship. But if you set up like this hierarchy or like I'm here, you're here, I'm untouchable, like I'm the leader, I never make mistakes, like that type of narrative, you won't be well reciprocated. And when you do make mistakes, because everyone does make mistakes, like people will not give you as much grace as you would want to, because treat others how you want to be treated. So when you expect others to give you grace, you should give others that grace as well.
No, that's real. We definitely have to practice that grace and that care. And like you're saying, like this phrase that I've heard people say before, like if you idolize something and you put it up here, when it falls, it's definitely gonna fall, right? And
exactly.
That made me think of that when you say like if we're doing all this hierarchy, all this like putting folks up on this particular space, or you're trying to set yourself up here, the fall is inevitable, right?
It always is.
Because the fall is the learning space. Like I feel like for me as a leader, I've learned way more through messing up, through people having to be like, Jordan, that was not the wave.
Literally.
Right? You was riding the heck out of it, but that was not the wave,
Mhm.
right? And I'm like, okay, cool. Let me figure out how I can reassess that within myself, right? But like you said, like if I'm not leading, and in those moments when I wasn't leading or coming from a space that was about us,
exactly,
as opposed to just me, it definitely made for rockier scenarios. So again, let's maybe one last thing, if we could, on like the encouragement of leadership, because I think it is really easy now, because especially we've been talking about like this accountability kind of piece, and it's like in the fall a little bit. It could be maybe really scary of that idea to put yourself out there,
exactly,
to be in front, to have those eyes on you. And I mean, you're doing student leadership in a time when everybody has the ability to record anything that you're doing, and to publicly, loudly make a comment about your choices. Right, like Facebook just started when I was in school. Not to do myself like that, right? But like Facebook was not popping like it was right now. We didn't have all that access. So I guess like what would be your take or your response on like just the importance of being able to kind of, I guess, overcome that fear of what that means, right? And to step out and be a leader.
I feel like, well, first of all, I don't think you should fear it.
Okay.
Because I feel like you should be aware of it, be cautious of it, but don't fear it. Because when you fear something, I feel like you set yourself up to maybe like not do exactly what you want to do or how you want to do it, because then it takes away that sense of authenticity.
There we go.
I'm from Chicago, so like growing up, there's this thing, I don't know if you've heard it, but it's like speak with your chest.
Okay.
So it's like if you feel a certain type of way, or if you say something, like say it how you actually feel it. So I literally live my life like that. Any opinion I have, any statement I make, regardless of if it's controversial or not, or if it's maybe a little out of pocket or out there, like I can ride that. Regardless, I don't care if other people don't agree with me. As long as I can agree within that self and I can sit with myself and go to sleep with that, I'm perfectly fine with that.
Yeah.
So you really just have to like be honest and true to yourself. And I just think at the end of the day, like I think self-reflection is the most important thing. Like you should always be questioning your beliefs, your actions, like who you are to then better yourself. And then also acknowledge when you do make mistakes, because no one's perfect.
Right.
And no one also expects you to be perfect. I feel like sometimes my biggest competitor or my biggest hindrance is my own self.
Yeah.
When I set these unrealistic or false narratives or expectations or whatever. So just being real and being honest, and then acknowledging when you make a mistake, and maybe even apologizing depending on the situation, and then just moving on and not holding on to it, but just learning from it, because you don't learn from being successful, honestly. You learn from failure, and a lot of psychology even proves that. So it's just like that's life, and then you just continue.
There it is. There it is. Leadership in the nutshell. It's life. The issues come and go, but that's what you learn from. That's just what it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
But no, I appreciate you. Thank you.
Yes. Well, thank you.
This was fun.